Friday morning, and joining us on the phone line now, my buddy Hank Burdine. Hank, how you doing today, sir?
Man, I'm doing good. The sun's shining up here in the Delta, but it's hot, my friend. But rocking along up here, we can handle the heat. Some of us are getting ready to get into Harvest, so that's what I wanted to talk about.
Well, and that's the thing, because we had some floods last month, and with it being that long ago, you think, oh, well, it's no big deal. It's over, right? Not necessarily.
No, that's not true at all. When I talked last week or so, I was called in to talk about the West Highway corridor and was asked about the flood and all. And the people that I had talked to after that event on June 8th through the 10th were farmers that were on the upper reaches of the horrendous flooding that we had. Their farms got underwater, but the majority of them got out of water pretty quick. We got to realize there are two drainage systems that this flood impacted. The upper Delta area drains down through the Beaufort into Steel Bayou, the Sunflower River systems. All those are contained within levees over on the east side of the Delta. And all of that water has to go out through the Steel Bayou gates down at Vicksburg. Now, east of that system, you've got the Tallahatchie, Yallabusha systems, and the Yazoo River. So we had that flood event hit both of those drainage systems. And we got to understand that the gates were open at Steel Bayou. The river was down somewhat, but it's a tremendous amount of water that had to go through those gates, and those people on the upper end, their farms came out of water sooner. The rest of those farms, there were over 100,000 acres of cropland that were flooded. A lot of those farms that were flooded, some of them were as much as 20%, some of them went up to as high as 80% underwater. And a lot of those farms didn't get out of water for a week, 10 days maybe. Well, by that time, the corn crop that was in the ground and growing profusely and doing very well just became a matted mess. The beans were killed that went underwater, of course, and it was too late to get in and plant a viable corn crop, replant a corn crop. And you couldn't get in and replant beans into that corn stubble because it was a matted jungle down there. You didn't have time to come in and disc it all up, clean it up, dry it up, and get back planted. So we had a lot of farmers in that area that had total loss on whatever parts of their farm went underwater. Now, and let's talk a little bit statistics here. And this came from my levee board engineer, Peter Nimrod, on the data that we had. In some areas that were hit, we had 8 to 10 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. Well, that's a lot of rain quick. The 100-year rainfall event is a little bit shy of 9 inches. So we had a 100-year event there in one day.
Wow.
Some areas received anywhere from 16 to 20 inches of rain over a 3-day period. That's 16 to 20 inches in 3 days. The 1,000-year rainfall event for this area is right at 15 inches. So we broke records that's unheard of. Now, a lot of these areas that were hit, when that system came across the river, and we didn't realize it was going to be like it was. It came through Rosedale, Pace, Cleveland, Shelby, Tutwiler, Glendora, and all the way down into Greenwood. So you had a tremendous amount of land that was hit, and 100,000 acres of cropland that had bumper crops growing on it. You had 551 homes that were impacted. You had 17 businesses that were impacted. 286 public roads went underwater. So what this event was a monumental event that these farmers have not come out of yet. Now, folks say, well, yeah, they got crop insurance. Well, crop insurance does not repay the farmer for what he has gone through during the last fall getting this land ready, the preparation going into planting, getting these beans in the ground, getting this corn in the ground. When you had some farms with up of 80% crop failure, the insurance only pays a minimal amount back. It does not give you back your 80 bushel bean crop you had out there, your 150 bushel corn crop out there. So there are a lot of farmers out there that are suffering big time right now because of that event. So hopefully we can get some help from the federal government, disaster areas or whatever, then hopefully that our representatives and senators up in Washington, they know the problem that happened. So it was a big deal down here, I'm telling you, and we must not take it lightly because these cats were hit hard, I'm telling you.
Well, and what you're saying, what it sounds like to me, Hank, is it wasn't a total loss, but it was awfully close because the insurance is not going to begin to cover what they did, in fact, lose. And there is no recourse. I assume those fields, from what you were saying there, are just now unplanted. They're just sitting there.
A lot of them are unplanted. And you've got another thing that you have to look at. When you plant a corn crop, there's a lot of chemicals that go in the ground. We're taking care of bugs and weeds and different grasses and all this kind of stuff. Well, when you try to go in and plant beans in a corn crop that's got different chemicals in there that are not suitable to a bean crop, you don't know what the residuals are in there, what that'll be. So if you go in as late as they were trying to plant some bean crops within the last couple of weeks, you're talking about middle of July, end of July bean crop. That's you lucky if you get a 35, 40 bushel crop off of that instead of your 80, 90 to 100 bushel that some of those crops we're looking at.
Well, and then you factor into that, on top of that, the heat wave that we're going through right now, and it seems to be the worst in the Delta. I don't know what it is about the Delta that's attracting the extreme weather events, but that seems to be the worst part of the heat wave for the state. That's not going to help crop growth either.
Well, no, it may not be too bad on some of the cotton crops, but it's a bad situation. Those folks, those good farmers that we got up here that were hit with that flood, and that's biblical time floods, what I'm talking about. That was a big deal that we had in those 2 days.
Now, somebody asked on the C Spire text line, Derek up in Greenwood, referring to something you mentioned a second ago, said, what kind of roads went underwater? What you mentioned there were a lot of roads that went underwater.
Yeah, there were. I mean, wherever the areas were that we had this flash flood, state highways, county roads went underwater. I've seen pictures of cars that floated out in the field and just nothing floating, nothing out there in the middle of that field but the roof of the car. And homes underwater, homes with water in them, businesses, all like that. So, I mean, Mountain Bayou was hit big time, as was Shelby and Rosedale. This was a monumental event we had up here.
Now, you know I'm going to ask this question, Hank, because we've talked about this a lot over the last year or two. And I'm not really sure on the answer on this one because this was a completely different thing. Would the pumps have had any effect on this?
All right. At the time that event happened, the pumps, had they been in place, would not have had any effect because the river was down low enough to where the gates would have been wide open and the water would have gotten out through those gates within that Steel Bayou system. Now, if we go back to 2019, when you had almost 600,000 acres of land underwater in the South Delta, with the river up, the gates closed, the pumps not in place to pump that water out, which would have relieved 250-something thousand acres of cropland down there. Had we got a rain like this, with those gates closed, there's no telling where that water would have backed up to. It's unbelievable what that impact would have been. Now, the pumps would have helped keep it to keep it down as that water got down to that system. But thank goodness in 2019, we didn't have this tremendous event that we had just 8 to the 10.
Well, if there's any good news to come out of it, that's it. We're up against a break. Can you hang on through the break? Because I want to ask you about the pumps, where we're at with that, and what the timeline looks like.
I'm holding on.
Fantastic. Hank Burdine, we will continue talking to him as we continue on the JT Show on a very, very hot Friday. We'll do that next. Hank needs to mention that crop insurance pays 65 to 75% of normal yields, significantly less than normal yields, and Hank did talk about that. Hank Burdine on the line with us. It's a losing proposition for those farmers that suffered that loss, but we mentioned before the break, Hank, about whether or not the pumps would have alleviated this, but there are major problems that we've seen in the past several years that the pumps would help with. What's the latest on getting those pumps built and installed? Where are we at in the process right now?
Right now, Congress has allocated $10 to $15 million that is being used for environmental studies down there. We're moving the proposed pumps now will be moved around to where Deer Creek comes into the Yazoo River, which is a much better place for the pumps to be located because it will collect the majority of the water that comes out of the Sunflower River systems before it has a chance to ever go through the diversion channel to get down to the original steel bow gates. So the environmental studies are being done, cultural studies are being done, and some of that money is being used to getting into the design phase of these pumps. The pumps are going to cost a good bit of money, and once we get into the design phase, then we've got a definite handle on what the steel and concrete costs are going to be for this. So we're going along. We're not there yet. We've got Representative Benny Thompson behind us on this deal. We've got Cindy Hyde-Smith, our senators, and Roger Wicker are all for the pumps. They know the good that these pumps will do, not only in flood control, getting water off of the cropland that's there, but also the environmental injustice that is being done because the pumps are not there. The 80% of the people that live down there are in a minority situation, and it has impacted them tremendously. We had a lady down there that owns Chuck's Dairy Bar in Rolling Fork testify before a Senate committee in Washington last week, telling about what has happened to her business, that the flood in 2019, and those we've had, impacted her more than the coronavirus shutdown did. So there's a lot of problems still down there that will continue to be there without these pumps. Now, the Corps of Engineers already issued their record determination early in the year. The previous EPA approved the new system, were part of the design part of the pumps, moving the pumps to a better location, another location, and also installing a series of well fields upstream to where during the extreme low water time, when the rivers and streams in the Delta dry up, then they will be able to cut these pumps on, these wells on, and to put water back in the Sunflower Basin, back into the Beaufort Basin, the Steel Bow stuff, to maintain a water flow in there for all the wildlife and everything, the fisheries, the mullets, the clams, the snails, everything like that. So it's a win-win situation, not only for flood control, but also for the environment and for wildlife. And the Mississippi Department of Wildlife Fisheries and Parks has come out in approval of the pump. The Mississippi Wildlife Federation has stated that they're behind these pumps. So they see the good impact these pumps will produce. Now, we still got some opposition.
That's what I was about to ask. We had heard that there were some people that had filed some lawsuits because it was going to damage the habitat of the purple-spotted Rocky Mountain fever frog or whatever it was down in the bottom parts of the river. Where are we at with those?
you've got a lawsuit that's going around Washington now. You got American Rivers that is coming out against it. You got the Sierra Club that's coming out against it. None of those people live anywhere close by here, have ever even been to the South Delta. Now, American Rivers re-put the Sunflower River on one of the top 10 most endangered rivers in America in case these pumps were built, because they said it will absolutely drain the Sunflower Basin. It'll dry up the Sunflower River. I extended an invitation to these people and was not responded to on it, and I put my boat in the water at 87-foot elevation, which is where the elevation of the water when the pumps would kick on. I took my boat as far up Deer Creek as I could go, as far up the Sunflower Systems as I could go, as far up Steel Bow as I could go, and especially looking at the Sunflower. At the elevation of 87, where the pumps would kick on, the entire Sunflower River down there was still in flood condition. It was still out of its banks. So for them to make a statement saying it's going to drain the Sunflower System, that's not correct at all, that it would destroy that river. That is a total falsehood, because I personally went down there and saw it, and would invite them down right now. We'll put my boat back in the water, and other boats too, and ride them around and show them what we got down there. But none of them have yet chosen to come see it on the ground.
Well, and you know this just as well as I do, Hank. Some of these groups will say whatever they think is going to back up their purpose and what they're wanting to get done or not done in this case, and they don't care if it's true. That doesn't matter to them.
They don't have any idea, because they've got a mailing list, an email list of hundreds of thousands of people that send in their $25 a year to be a member of the Sierra Club, American Rivers, or whatever. And when they send out a flash email and all of these people see that they're fixing to do this stuff that they claim is going to happen, whether it's true or not, then they write the check for another $15 and send it in to them. So it's a money-making deal for them. In my viewpoint, my personal viewpoint, when they get somebody all upset and the danders up in the air, oh, yeah, send some more money. Y'all fight this thing. Bring your tails down here, get in the boat, get in the water, and see what it's like. But they've chosen not to do that.
And they won't. I'm going to tell you, you could offer them an all-expenses-paid trip, pay for their plane ticket and everything else, buy them lunch. They don't care. They don't care what the reality is. All they care about, like you said, is the money and the influence that they get from fighting this fight, whether it's even a fight to have or not.
Well, there's another thing that these pumps were authorized in 1941. There were 23 is the proper number, 23 backwater areas that were part of this Mississippi River and Tributaries project. Of those 23 backwater areas with levees in there and pumps allocated and authorized for it, 22 have been built, 22 pumps are in place, and the only pump not in place is the South Delta. Now, in 2019, we had a flyover with one of the EPA people on the helicopter, and as we flew over the South Delta with 600,000 acres underwater, the helicopter flew over Louisiana across the river, and there they were farming. They had beans in the ground. They had a wonderful corn crop going. And that area over there is actually 4 to 5 feet lower in elevation than the South Delta. And she asked a question. She says, why are they farming over here and they're not able to do it in the South Delta? And Peter explained to them that that is a backwater area also, but they have pumps in place that allow them to farm across the river at a higher elevation. We had 600,000 acres underwater and no crop.
At one point, you had told me that it's probably about a 2 to 3 year period from the time they say go until the pumps are built. Has that clock started yet? Have we reached that point?
We are not quite at that point. We're getting work done now with the funds that have been allocated in the beginning the design stage. doing the cultural research, doing the environmental research. So that's kicking loose. If we get the go-ahead from Congress to say, build the pumps, then we can get into big-time business of getting the design done within hopefully a year of time, and then begin to start pouring concrete, digging foundations. We're looking at very possibly a 4-year time frame to where we can flip the switch and cut the pumps on.
But that 4-year timeline hasn't started yet. We're not quite there yet.
It hadn't quite started yet, but it is to a degree in the fact that we're doing the environmental research, the cultural research, and beginning on the design phase. Now, there's another thing that a lot of the opposition is saying, well, if you cut a 14,500 cubic foot per second pumping water into the Mississippi River, my goodness, you're going to flood out everybody downstream. What they don't realize, if they pull their head out of the sand and look at the numbers, when that 14,500 cubic foot per second pump kicks on, the Mississippi River is already flowing at over 2 million cubic feet per second.
Hank, we are out of time, my friend. I got to let you go, but we'll catch up again soon, okay?
Let's do it. Thank you.